pour in again from Europe to the promised land in the hope of making their fortune. The trade unions began to set up a color bar once again and refused to accept black workers. Racial discrimination spread in the North. Black workers received less pay than whites for the same job. And the black living areas began to degenerate into slums. Bitterness and disillusionment have always made Harlem susceptible to promises of redemption. Marcus Garvey was one of the first in a long line of prophets and saviors. Even the black Muslims base many of their tenets on Garvey's ideas and vision. Their founder and leader, Elijah Muhammad, used to be a member of Garvey's movement, just like the parents of Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. The red, black, and green flag of the UNIA still waves at the corner of 125th Street. And the park in the center of Harlem recalls the radical days of the 20s. (1918). The armistice was signed. The First World War came to an end. Although the Afro-American made up only about 10% of the population of the USA, 13% of America's World War I soldiers were black. They were sent to the battlefields to defend democracy, but there was no place for them even in their own army. Racial segregation in the U.S. Army forced the Afro-American soldiers to fight alongside the French troops. The U.S. military command was worried because they feared that the black soldiers had been influenced by French ideas of equality and fraternity. In spite of the disappointment and disillusionment, Harlem continued to attract new immigrants. Gamblers and speculators in the construction industry made huge profits. Soon Harlem was one of the most densely populated areas of New York. Marcus Garvey was also one of the new immigrants, and a very critical one.
The Negroes are determined to suffer no longer. We are going in for mass organization. In the past, we have worked separately and individually. Now, we are going to organize.
Marcus Garvey's message did not fall on deaf ears. Many Afro-Americans were now convinced that they had neither a home nor a future in the USA. In 1919, Marcus Garvey founded the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, in the United States. It was an immediate success. Changes also took place in his private life. He was divorced and remarried. Amy Jacques, a Jamaican who lived in New York. She was to become his closest and most reliable associate. Marcus and Amy had two sons. The eldest, Marcus, recalls,
for the first time, black people all over the world began to come together. So the great impact of the UNIA was to unify African people in different parts and to point them in the direction towards nationhood. Because the Garveyite program of the UNIA called for the mobilization of African people outside to return to Africa. And this purpose was quite clear, although it was not expressed by the people who commented on Marcus Garvey. It was very clear what was intended. It was the building of a strong, central nation in Africa, and which this concept was quite different from that of the Negroes who were here in the United States and the Negroes outside of the United States who call themselves leaders, because they were really just isolated tribesmen crying out for to improve the working conditions of black people and their social conditions. They were not concerned with the building of nationhood.
The UNI contended that black Americans would never become truly emancipated until they became an economic power. Garvey stated over and over again that people could not call themselves free if they were economically dependent. He wrote in an article,
"The Universal Negro Improvement Association, as everyone will admit, the most thoughtful Negro movement in the world, is now, according to the need of the time, emphasizing economic expansion and solidarity among Negroes. We have to make new conquests in the economic field. We must have wealth in culture, wealth in education, and solid wealth of real economic values."
Garvey founded the Negro World as the official newspaper of the UNIA. Marianne Samad remembers her childhood as a member of the UNIA.
We were called the elite, now, if that can help you, by the main paper of the United States, the New York Times, so that Garvey had evolved an elitist group. I didn't have to do as other children did, to say that, well, I was a Negro, and so I was at the bottom of the barrel. We used the term Negro in the organization because that's what Mr. Garvey had to use, because he was, remember, not a naturalized citizen of the country. So he used the term Negro, but we ourselves at home knew we were black, we were African, and that made it so different for us. It made it, just as I said, perfect. I loved my life as a child. It was a good life. We had our own God. We didn't have a white God. We had our African fundamentalism that we grew up under. Mr. Garvey told us who we were, that the Sphinx, the pyramids were all ours, that the ancient kings, that the African kings were in the Bible. He showed us and pointed them out to us. He gave us black angels. Now, this was unusual, and some people were rather worried. The woman was glorified in the family. She was the mother who taught, and above her she was protected by the Almighty. The Jesus child looked like us. So therefore, to explain my childhood, I would have to say I was as perfect as maybe any white child in the United States could be. This was our standard. The red, the black, and the green. This is the original one that Mr. Garvey himself would have held. The red for one blood of black men all over the world. Black meaning the black peoples of the world wherever we were. And green for Mother Africa.
The UNIA also had its own symbolical army, the African Legion. A black man might have been a porter during the day, taking his orders from a white man, but he was a proud officer of the African army when it assembled at night. Garvey not only promised the despised Negro a paradise on earth, he also made him an important person in his immediate environment. James Thornhill, a British seaman, was a captain in the African Legion.
I'd come here from England, and when I come here, I heard him lecturing about Africa. So I got interested and stopped. He said, I would like you to give you some of the documents of the organization to take with you, and wherever you go, whatever country you go in, you give them to black people.
But not all black people were receptive to Garvey's message. The established leaders of the black communities, preachers, ward politicians, and the small